We had been married for 10 years when my husband found the love of his life. He said she had a pure soul, that money didn't matter to her. I turned to my assistant and said, "Cancel his credit cards, suspend the delivery of his mother's medication, and change the locks." The love of his life. Well, I was about to grant his wish. I sat in front of my vanity, studying the woman in the mirror. At 35, faint wrinkles were already appearing at the corners of my eyes. They were the traces of sleepless nights, spent managing the accounting for my company, caring for my sick mother-in-law, and funding my husband's endless academic research projects. Today, I chose a deep plum silk dress, elegant yet authoritative. Much like my current position in my family and the corporate world. Today was my 10th wedding anniversary with David. People often say that a wife's devotion never goes unrewarded. I had clung to that phrase for a decade. As the spoiled daughter of a wealthy family, I had agreed to marry David, a poor adjunct professor with a heavy family burden. Back then, my parents were dead set against it. My mother told me the problem wasn't marrying a poor man, the problem was marrying into a family that didn't know how to appreciate anything. I was young. I believed in love, in kindness, and in David's intellect. So I turned a deaf ear to their warnings. I poured my entire inheritance and business acumen into building the corporate empire we had today, single-handedly dragging my husband's entire family out of the swamp of poverty. I opened a drawer and took out a luxurious red velvet box. Inside lay the Patek Philippe watch I had ordered from Switzerland 6 months ago. David often complained that the leather strap on his old watch was worn out, making him look less than elegant during his university lectures or faculty meetings. I remembered his every word, every furrow of his brow. To me, David wasn't just a husband, he was my intellectual pride, someone I always looked up to. I was a businesswoman to the bone, steeped in the scent of money and profit margins. Because of that, I cherished his scholarly, noble academic aura. My phone rang. It was my assistant, Chloe. "Miss Vance. Everything is ready at the old campus pub near Columbia. The chef says he prepared the classic beef stew exactly as you requested, just like the old days." I smiled. "Perfect. Thank you, Chloe. I'll be there soon. Don't tell David. I want it to be a surprise." I slipped the watch into my purse, my heart racing like it did in the early days of our romance. Instead of the candlelit, Michelin-starred restaurants frequented by high society, I decided to celebrate our anniversary right where it all began, at a rundown pub near the university campus. 10 years ago, we hosted our modest wedding reception there. We were so broke back then, just a few tables with cheap food. The bride and groom wore mud-splattered shoes because it had been pouring rain. But amidst those hardships, I would never forget the look in David's eyes, full of gratitude and promise. He took my hand and swore in front of our friends. "Liz, bear with me now. And when I succeed, I will repay you 1,000 times over." I had engraved that vow into my heart. I didn't need him to repay me with gold or silver. All I needed was his unconditional love. I backed my luxury Mercedes SUV out of the garage. This sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was built on the blood and sweat of my last 10 years. Every brick, every tree in the garden had been nurtured by my hands. I thought of Helen, my mother-in-law, who had just narrowly escaped death thanks to a kidney I had sourced through sheer willpower, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to secure the best surgeons at Mount Sinai. I thought of Sarah, my capricious, wasteful sister-in-law, who begged me for money every month to buy designer bags and go clubbing in Manhattan. I protected them not because I had money to burn, but because I loved David. I wanted him to focus on his academic work without worrying about his family's survival. The streets of New York at dusk were bustling, but my heart felt light. I pictured David's surprised face when he saw me at the old pub. He would surely be moved. He was always such a nostalgic, sentimental man. The car glided through familiar streets, bringing me back to the old Morningside Heights neighborhood. The old elm trees still stood there, silent witnesses to generations of students. I parked in a quiet corner, smoothed out my dress, and applied a touch more red lipstick. I wanted to look radiant, to show David that despite the passage of time and the crushing weight of our finances, his wife had retained her beauty and charm. I stepped out of the car, the cool evening breeze catching my silk skirt. A flutter of excitement filled my chest. I hadn't told David. I simply texted him that I had a late corporate dinner and that he should eat without me. In reality, I had contacted the old pub owner, paying him generously to open the place just for us. Gift box in hand, I walked down the cobblestone alley leading to the pub. Memories flashed through my mind. Back then, a $15 bowl of beef stew was the greatest luxury David could afford for me. We shared every spoonful of broth. We saved the most tender pieces of meat for each other. How could that poverty-stricken past be so beautiful and meaningful? I couldn't have imagined that the place holding the most beautiful memories of my life would, today, become the graveyard of my 10-year marriage. The pub's wooden door with its peeling paint was slightly ajar, casting a faint strip of yellow light. I smiled, assuming the owner had left the lights on for me. But no, something was wrong. My heart skipped a beat when I saw a familiar black Mercedes parked discreetly behind a row of overgrown hydrangeas. It was the car I had bought David last month to celebrate his tenure track promotion. Why was his car here? Did he remember our anniversary too and want to surprise me? The thought soothed me for a second. Maybe my husband and I really were on the same wavelength. I tiptoed closer, planning to jump out and scare him like we used to do in our mischievous college days. But as I drew near, the intuition of a seasoned woman made my footsteps heavy. There was no music, no romantic atmosphere, just a chilling silence wrapping around the building, occasionally broken by the wind whistling through the cracks. I decided not to use the front door. I walked around to the back alley. It led to the kitchen. I used to sneak in this way to give David my extra meal swipes when he ran out of money at the end of the month. The rusty kitchen door was cracked open. The musty smell of old brick hit my nose, mixed with an unfamiliar perfume so sweet and pungent it was almost nauseating. And then I heard a laugh. It wasn't the boisterous laugh of friends. It was the flirtatious giggle of a young woman, intertwined with a deep, warm voice I had listened to for the past 10 years. My husband's voice. "You're terrible. Why did you ask me to meet you in this dump? It's safer here. More intimate, baby. Besides, this place has a lot of memories. I want to create new memories with you. Erase all the old, dead ones." David's words were like a bucket of ice water thrown directly into my face. The chill seeped into my bones. I froze, gripping the red velvet box so tightly my nails dug into my palm, shooting sharp pain up my arm. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the knife twisting in my heart. Erase all the old dead ones. It turned out that my 10 years of youth, 10 years of sacrifice, 10 years of sharing his grief and joy were nothing more to him than dead garbage that needed to be erased. I held my breath and pressed myself against the grease-stained wall, straining to hear every word. I needed to know who this woman was, and just how deeply my model academic husband had rotted. The darkness of the kitchen corner seemed to swallow me whole. But that same darkness allowed me to see the true face of the man I once worshipped. The clumsy, cruel play was reaching its climax. I hid behind the swinging door, separating the kitchen from the main dining area. The narrow crack barely let my gaze through, but it was enough to capture the entire scene. Under the yellowish light of an old incandescent bulb, David sat on one of those familiar vinyl chairs. But he wasn't alone. Sitting straddled across his lap was a slender young woman with long, flowing black hair. She wore a tight, cropped blouse and a provocatively short skirt, pressing herself against my husband's chest. The hands I held every night, the hands whose every scratch I tended to, were now caressing the bare back of another woman. I felt my breath catch, as if someone were choking me. Blood rushed to my head, but the rationality of a CEO forged in 1,000 corporate battles forced me to stay calm. I couldn't break down now. I had to see it all. I had to hear everything. "David." The girl's voice was syrupy sweet, but to my ears, it sounded as rancid as rotting fish. "Tuition is due soon, and my mom is really sick back home. I don't know how I'll manage. I think I might have to take a leave of absence." David hugged her tighter. His voice overflowed with a compassion and tenderness he hadn't shown me in years. "Silly girl, you have me. Why are you worrying about money? Just focus on your studies. I'll take care of your mother's medical bills and your tuition. You're a talent. You're my muse. I won't let the dirt of this world tarnish you. But where will you get the money? I heard your wife controls the finances with an iron fist. What if she finds out you're helping me?" At the mention of me, David's tone shifted violently. The tenderness vanished, replaced by an astonishing resentment and disgust. Don't mention that soulless bitch. You're ruining the mood. What does she know besides money, money, and more money? She sits around all day buried in spreadsheets, calculating profit and loss. She's so materialistic, so dry. Every time she opens her mouth, it's about projects and contracts. Being near her feels like I'm suffocating in a prison. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. Soulless bitch. Materialistic. Dry. That materialistic money bought your mother's life-saving medication. It bought the Mercedes you drive, the Greenwich mansion you live in, and even funded the research that got you your PhD. Those dry spreadsheets were the only thing that kept your family from starving in the streets. The girl giggled with a faint note of triumph. Well, she seems very capable to me. Plus, she takes great care of your family. I even heard she funds scholarships at our university. Actually, I'm on a grant from her company. Her words struck my mind like lightning. A grant from my company. I narrowed my eyes, peering through the crack to get a better look at the girl's face. In the dim light, her oval face and wide, innocent eyes started to look familiar. Lauren. It was Lauren Evans, a senior literature major. Earlier this year, I had personally signed off on a $25,000 merit and hardship scholarship for her. I remembered it clearly because she had written a touching personal essay about her humble background and immense determination. When I handed her the award, she had taken my hand with tears in her eyes and said, "Thank you, Miss Vance. You are my benefactor. I'm going to follow your example and become a successful woman." It turned out she was following my example by stealing my husband. She used my money to dress up, shop, and then use that fake innocence to seduce her benefactor's husband. The sheer audacity of the situation defied imagination. David laughed contemptuously, stroking Lauren's hair. "Her money is my money. You think she's some kind of genius?" Without my emotional support, without me managing our social circles, how would she make money so easily? She's just a money-printing machine. But you, Lauren, you are a soul, the true love of my life. You're pure, kind, you understand poetry, music, art. You understand the torment of an intellectual like me. When she comes home, she reeks of money and expensive, cloying perfume. Just the smell of her makes me sick to my stomach. Sick to my stomach. Those words echoed in my head. The expensive perfume I wore because he once told me it smelled elegant. Who was I working myself to death for? I looked at the gift box in my hand. The glittering Patek Philippe seemed to mock me. My sincerity, my 10 years of devotion, were now being compared to a sugar baby college student and ruthlessly trampled on. The rage inside me didn't erupt into a blazing fire. It condensed into something cold and sharp as ice. I felt sorry for myself and utterly disgusted by the two of them playing out their cheap romantic farce. All the affection, all the respect I had for David vanished completely in that instant. I took a deep breath, swallowing my tears. The old Liz, the naive college girl who believed in love in a shack, was dead. Standing here now was Elizabeth Vance, CEO of Apex Holdings. I would not let anyone trample on my pride. I carefully set the velvet box on a dusty prep table. I didn't need it anymore. I fixed my hair, smoothed my dress. I wasn't going to walk out there to throw a jealous tantrum like some ordinary housewife. I was going out there to teach them the price of betrayal. I stepped forward and kicked the wooden swinging door with all my might. Bang! The deafening crash shattered the intimate atmosphere. The two adulterers jumped out of their skin. Lauren let out a muffled scream and frantically shoved David away, awkwardly fumbling to button her blouse. David turned as pale as a ghost. His eyes went wide, staring at the door as if he'd seen a demon. I stood in the doorway, my shadow stretching long across the old tiled floor. My gaze was absolute ice. I scanned the two of them, trembling like sewer rats caught in a spotlight. Liz. David's voice shook. He stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. What? What are you doing here? I didn't answer immediately. I walked in calmly. The click of my heels against the tiles was steady and firm, like a judge's gavel ready to deliver a sentence. I walked right up to their plastic table, pulled out the chair opposite them, and sat down, crossing my legs with the same effortless elegance I used in the boardroom. Surprised? I forced a smile I knew was more terrifying than crying. Isn't today our 10th anniversary? I came here to reminisce about the good old days. And what do I find? A highly entertaining theatrical performance. Lauren had already recognized me. The color completely drained from her face. She quickly lowered her head, wringing her hands, and timidly hid behind David. Miss Vance, I'm so sorry. I shut up. My voice was barely a whisper, but it carried enough authority to snap her mouth shut instantly. I didn't give you permission to speak. I turned to David, the man whose tie I had lovingly adjusted this very morning. Now, seeing his disheveled state, sweating profusely from fear, I felt nothing but a profound contempt for his cowardice. What was it you were saying a minute ago? I tilted my head, pretending to think. A soulless bitch? Materialistic, dry, only understands money? David, for the last 10 years, this bitch has supported your entire family. From the food in your mouths to the roof over your heads to your fake academic prestige. You say my money makes you sick, yet you eagerly cash those checks every single month. The car you drive, the suits you wear, even the underwear on your body. Is there a single thing you own that wasn't bought with my nauseating money? David, recovering slightly from his initial panic, felt his fragile intellectual ego flare up. He jumped to his feet, adjusting his clothes in a desperate attempt to claw back some dignity. Don't think just because you have money you can come here and lecture me, he snarled, his face turning purple. You've been spying on me. You hired a PI. I knew it. Living with you is like living in a prison. You never respect my privacy. I burst out laughing. The bitter sound echoed off the empty pub walls. Privacy? You call having an affair with a student and using your wife's money to fund your sugar baby privacy? David, you have a PhD. You teach at an Ivy League university. And your logic is worse than a toddler's. I didn't need to spy on you. Karma is real, my dear. I came here to surprise you. But the surprise you gave me is a bit too big to swallow. I shifted my gaze to Lauren, who was still cowering behind him. And you, Lauren Evans. The brilliant student. The shining example of overcoming adversity. I emphasized every word. You take my scholarship, you accept my corporate sponsorship, and you repay me by sleeping with my husband. Is this the morality they teach you in college? Lauren suddenly lifted her head. Her eyes brimmed with tears, a look designed to make any man want to protect her, but which only fueled my disgust. Miss Vance, don't insult me. Professor Vance and I are together out of true love. We have a spiritual connection. I don't want your money. I love him for who he is. What a grand, true love. I clapped my hands sarcastically. You don't want money? Then who was just whining about being poor and begging for tuition? Who was asking for money for their sick mother? Do you think I'm an idiot? If David were a DoorDash driver or a starving construction worker, would you have a spiritual connection with him? Or did you just notice his professor title and the shiny Mercedes he drives? Seeing his little mistress cornered, David stepped in, glaring fiercely at me. Shut up. Don't you dare judge Lauren with your vulgar, transactional mindset. She is 1,000 times purer than you. Look at yourself. Always talking about money. Have you ever stopped to figure out what I need? What I think? Lauren gives me inspiration. She makes me feel like a real man, not some kept pet like I feel when I'm around you. A kept pet. I stood up to look David dead in the eye. I wasn't as tall as him, but my aura in that moment made him take a physical step back. So you finally admit you're a kept man. Excellent. If you are so sick of this suffocating life, so sick of this wife who reeks of money, then let's set each other free. I looked straight into his eyes, pronouncing each word like a steel blade. Tomorrow, I am filing for divorce. You and your true love. Better get ready to enjoy life without the scent of money. Let's see if your noble souls can put food on the table. With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, not giving a single glance back at the stunned faces I left behind. But just as I reached the main door, I saw two familiar figures hurrying inside. It was Helen and Sarah. The whole family was here. The play wasn't over. The most thrilling act was just beginning. Helen and Sarah appeared in the doorway, impeccably dressed and heavily perfumed. They had probably come for the anniversary party they assumed I had prepared. But instead of a celebratory dinner, they walked into a powder keg. Seeing Lauren hiding behind her son, Helen's gaze flickered slightly. I knew damn well Lauren was no stranger to her. Once, I had seen a text from Lauren on David's phone, casually asking his mother about her health. They had been meeting behind my back. The only idiot kept in the dark was me. I looked straight at Helen and greeted her with dripping irony. "Helen! Sarah, you're right on time. Come in and watch the wonderful play your precious son and brother is putting on." Before Helen could speak, David stepped forward, entirely changing his tune and adopting the persona of an aggrieved victim. "Mom, look at her. She came here just to cause a scene, to insult me and Lauren. She thinks that because she has money, she can trample all over our family. I can't take it anymore." Sarah, my sister-in-law with her brassy, bleached blonde hair, glared at me and rushed to her brother. "Liz, what is all this screaming? My brother is a university professor, a man of status. Have some respect for his image. If there's a problem, we handle it at home behind closed doors. Why are you airing dirty laundry?" I laughed a cold, hollow sound. "Respect for his image? Ask your brother if he cared about his image when he brought his mistress to this very pub to screw around. Look closely, Sarah. This is Lauren, the student my company sponsors. Your brother is sleeping with a girl who relies on his wife's charity. Does that sound honorable to you?" Helen finally stepped fully into the room. She showed neither surprise nor anger toward her son. Instead, when she looked at me with a reproachful expression, the exact same look she had given me for 10 years whenever I didn't instantly bow to her demands. "Liz, as a woman, you need to learn to be patient. It's only natural for a man to stray sometimes. If David went out to have a little fun, it's just to blow off steam from work. If you, as his wife, don't know how to keep your husband happy and let him seek comfort elsewhere, you have only yourself to blame. You can't blame anyone else." I turned to stone. My ears rang at my mother-in-law's psychotic logic. I, the devoted daughter-in-law who sold her own mother's jewelry to fund her medical treatments early in our marriage, was now just a woman who couldn't keep a man. "How can you say that, Helen?" I argued, my voice tight with restraint. "I sacrificed everything for this family, and in return, I get blatant betrayal. Who took care of you when you were sick? Who paid off Sarah's credit card debt? Where do you think the money came from for that massive house you live in?" Helen pursed her lips and waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "Oh, please. Don't go throwing your money in our faces like it makes you a god. Our family may not be billionaires, but we have principles and values. We value love, not cold, hard cash like you do. David is a genius. One of a kind. He needs a wife who understands him, who connects with him spiritually, not a merchant who only knows how to count pennies." Seeing that she had allies, Lauren stepped out from behind David, her eyes brimming with fake tears. "Mrs. Vance is right. I love Professor Vance so much. He feels so lonely in his own home. Miss Vance, please let him go. We truly love each other. Please give us your blessing." I looked at the 3 shameless faces standing before me, a cheating husband, an ungrateful mother-in-law, and an arrogant mistress. They had united against me, using the shield of fake morality to attack me. I suddenly realized my greatest mistake. The biggest mistake of my life wasn't marrying a poor man. It was marrying into a family of ungrateful leeches. David, emboldened by his mother and his mistress, grew even more arrogant. He pointed a finger at me. "Do you hear that? Everyone sees how unreasonable you are. You're the only one who doesn't get it. You always think you're the best, that you're doing my family some massive favor. I am sick of your condescending attitude. Lauren understands me. She values me as a human being. She loves me as a normal man, regardless of wealth or status. That is true love. True love regardless of wealth." I wanted to laugh right in his face. Let's see how long this true love lasts when I cut off the cash flow. I took a deep breath, fully regaining the icy composure of a CEO. I didn't need to argue with people who were operating on a subhuman intellectual level. "Fine," I said, my voice dropping below freezing. "If you despise my money so much, and value your noble love above all else, I will grant your wish." I turned to Helen and Sarah, my gaze so sharp they physically flinched. "Helen, Sarah, remember the words you said today? Never regret them." I looked back at my husband. "And you, David? You say Lauren loves you for who you are, regardless of material wealth? Right? Perfect. Hold on to that belief. I picked up my purse, straightened my spine, and held my head high. I wasn't walking out of here as a defeated woman running away. I was leaving like a queen shaking off blood-sucking parasites. We are done here. I'll see you in court. I walked out the door, leaving behind their hateful glares and Lauren's triumphant smirk. She thought she had won. She had just stepped into hell without even knowing it. As soon as I stepped out of the pub, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. It was Helen. She rushed up, blocking my path, her face flushed with anger. Stop. Where do you think you're going? You cause a massive scene and think you can just walk away? I stopped and looked at her with unprecedented coldness. In the past, whenever she raised her voice, I lowered my head and apologized to keep the peace. But today, my patience died along with my marriage. Where I go is my business. You no longer have the right to question me. Helen glared, jabbing a finger toward me. How dare you speak to your mother-in-law like that, you ill-bred brat? You think because you have money you can do whatever you want? Let me tell you something. My son is right to leave you. A woman like you, who only knows how to make money, who neglects her husband and doesn't understand obedience, nobody wants you. Sarah jogged up and joined her mother. Exactly. Look at yourself. You're getting old, always walking around with a sour face. Lauren is young, beautiful, and sweet. It's totally normal my brother fell for her. You should look in a mirror and do some self-reflection, instead of blaming everyone else. I looked at the two women with absolute, unadulterated contempt. These were the people I had meticulously cared for over the past 10 years. I remembered the sleepless nights sitting in the ER when Helen had her episodes. I remembered Sarah calling me crying at 3 a.m. because she was being harassed by debt collectors, and I had to drive to the city to bail her out. I treated them like family, but in their eyes, I was nothing but a cash cow, a soulless ATM. Enough, I barked, my voice so commanding they both instantly shut their mouths. You call me an old, ugly materialist. Fine. Let's see how many days you can survive on your noble principles without the money of this old, ugly materialist. Helen scoffed dismissively. Oh, please. Don't try to scare us. Even without your money, my son is a PhD, a prestigious university professor. His salary is more than enough to support our family. You think we'll starve without you? A prestigious professor. I laughed bitterly. Do you have any idea how much your son actually makes as an adjunct? $4,000 a month. Helen, that won't even cover a fraction of your weekly vitamin supplements or Sarah's bar tabs. Do you seriously think your trips to Europe, your designer clothes, and your country club dinners were paid for on his salary? Sarah stood up straighter and countered. Liar! My brother has huge research grants that bring in hundreds of thousands. He told me himself. Stop trying to trick us. Grants. I shook my head, disgusted by their sheer ignorance. Those projects are 100% funded by my corporate foundation. I poured money into Columbia just to buy him a reputation. Now that I am pulling the funding, his project will be shut down immediately. Just watch. Helen seemed to hesitate for a fraction of a second, but forced her false pride back up. You wouldn't dare. If you do that, you'll ruin my son's career. Don't be so cruel. Cruel? I looked her dead in the eye. Compared to how you treated me today, what I am about to do is an act of mercy. You chose a side. You chose to insult me and trample on my sacrifices. Do not blame me for being ruthless. I didn't want to waste another breath on them. I turned and walked straight to my car. Helen tried to lunge at me, but I slammed the door shut. Through the soundproof glass, I could see her screaming and cursing, her face contorted with rage. Sarah stomped her feet in frustration. I started the engine and drove past them as if they were strangers. In the rearview mirror, the figures of my former family grew smaller until they disappeared. I didn't cry. My tears were too precious to waste on people who didn't deserve them. The car merged onto the highway. I rolled down the window to let the night wind dry the cold sweat on my forehead. My mind was clearer than it had ever been. The pain had passed, making way for cold, precise calculation. I picked up my phone and dialed my loyal assistant. Chloe. It's Liz. Yes, miss. Vance. How was the anniversary? Was David surprised? Immensely, I laughed bitterly. But we'll talk about that later. Right now, listen carefully to my instructions and execute them immediately. Yes, ma'am. I'm listening. Chloe's voice turned dead serious, sensing the shift in my tone. First, contact American Express. Request an immediate freeze on all supplementary cards under the names David Vance, Helen Vance, and Sarah Vance. Reason: requested by the primary account holder. Do it right now. Block everything. But isn't David on a trip? Won't he? Chloe started to ask, but stopped herself. No questions, Chloe. Block them immediately. Yes. Doing it right now. Second, I continued firmly. Call the property management for the Greenwich estate. Tell them to cut off the Wi-Fi and cable. Simultaneously, contact the power and water companies and request a temporary suspension of service. Tell them the owner is leaving for a long time. Cut the lights and water. But Helen and Sarah are still living in the house. No, it is no longer their house. That deed is in my name. It's my premarital asset. What I do with it is my right. Just follow my orders. Yes, ma'am. Understood. Third, draft an immediate letter pulling our foundation's funding for the research project led by Dr. David Vance. State the reason as violation of the Principal Investigator Ethics Clause. Send it to the Dean of Columbia University. CCing David, tomorrow morning, Miss Vance. That's extremely serious. If we suddenly pull the grant, David could face severe sanctions, even termination. That is exactly what I want, I said clearly. He used my corporate funds to maintain a mistress right on campus, publicly humiliating me. I am taking back everything I gave him. There was silence on the line for a few seconds. Then Chloe's voice returned with absolute resolve. Understood, Miss Vance. I will execute everything immediately. Are you? Okay? I am perfectly fine. Thank you, Chloe. One more thing. Go ahead. Contact New York Presbyterian Hospital. Cancel the kidney transplant scheduled for Helen Vance next week. Tell them the financial guarantor is withdrawing. Request her medical file be pulled from the active roster. This time, Chloe was genuinely shocked. Miss Vance, that's a matter of life and death. Helen has been waiting for that kidney every single day. I gripped the steering wheel, my eyes locked on the dark road ahead. I know, but they trampled on my kindness. They said I only use money to buy affection. Well then, I'll show them that without my money, they can't even keep their lives. Do it. Yes, ma'am. I'll do it. I hung up and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. A wave of grim satisfaction washed over me. I never thought I could be this ruthless, but they had forced my hand. I remembered Helen's words. Our family has principles and values. Principles and values. A mother defending her son's affair, a sister-in-law insulting the woman paying her debts, and a whole family attacking the person keeping them afloat. I laughed at their principles. My car pulled into the underground garage of a luxury high-rise on Central Park South. I wasn't going back to Greenwich. That place was now tainted by the breath of traitors. I had a penthouse here that I bought secretly 2 years ago, intending to use it as a quiet retreat when the corporate grind got too heavy. Now, it would be my fortress. The place where I would begin my new life. I parked and took the private elevator. Watching the numbers tick up to the 50th floor, I knew the real battle had just begun. Tonight was going to be a very long night for them. When their cards declined, when the house plunged into darkness, when their last hope for life was extinguished, they would finally understand the price of betrayal. I opened the door and flipped on the lights. The luxurious, silent, immaculate space welcomed me. I poured myself a glass of red wine, stepped out onto the balcony, and looked out over the glittering Manhattan skyline. Tomorrow, a hurricane was going to hit, and I, Elizabeth Vance, would be the one directing it. The first rays of morning sun pierced through the heavy curtains, illuminating the spacious, cold living room. I hadn't slept. The wine glass in my hand had been empty for hours, but the bitter taste lingered on my tongue. I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. Chloe's confirmation emails had arrived at 3:00 a.m. All my orders had been executed. The supplementary accounts were frozen. The grant termination letter was drafted and waiting for my electronic signature. The utility suspension notices were filed, and most importantly, There was a confirmation from NY Presbyterian regarding the canceled surgery. I stared at the words on the screen. Memories of the desperate months I spent searching for a kidney played in slow motion. 2 years ago, when Helen was diagnosed with end-stage renal failure, the whole family fell apart. David only knew how to cry and complain. Sarah was just terrified that if her mother died, no one would give her allowance money. I was the only one who took charge. I flew to specialists across the country. I contacted the best transplant coordinators. The money I spent was astronomical, but I never counted pennies. Back then, I viewed her as my own mother. I remembered the day I found a match. I cried tears of joy. I rushed home to deliver the news. Helen hugged me, calling me her savior, the best daughter-in-law in the world. David held my hand, swearing eternal gratitude. It turned out it was all empty talk. I clicked the mouse to electronically sign the document. A soft click, but it carried the weight of an indirect death sentence. I wasn't killing her. I was simply taking back the life extension I had handed her on a silver platter. If she and her family so despised my money, let them use their noble love and family values to save her. I picked up my phone and called the private security firm I kept on retainer. Mike, it's Liz Vance. Good morning, Miss Vance. How can we help? I want you to dispatch a team to the Greenwich estate immediately. Your task is to change all the locks and recalibrate the biometric security system. Access will be restricted strictly to me and my children. No one else is allowed on the property. Not my husband, not my mother-in-law. Understood? Understood, ma'am. What should we do with their belongings? Pack all their personal items into cardboard boxes and leave them outside the front gate. As for the valuables, art, antiques, cars, if they don't have paperwork proving they bought it, it stays in the house. We will dispatch immediately. What about the Mercedes with the license plate? That car is registered to my holding company. Have someone drive it back to the corporate lot and impound it. If anyone resists, call the local police and let them handle it legally. Clear? Crystal clear. Don't worry. I hung up, feeling a surge of adrenaline down my spine. I was no longer the submissive wife. I was the master of the board. I put on a sharp power suit and carefully applied makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I had one more vital meeting today. A meeting with the most important people in my life, my 2 young children. I drove to the exclusive private school my kids attended. Paul was 10 and Sophie was 8. They were my greatest treasures. The only reason I had hesitated to file for divorce for so long, I was terrified they would miss their father, that they would suffer. But after last night, I realized that letting them grow up in a toxic environment with a hypocritical father and a vicious grandmother was the true cruelty. I pulled them out of school early. Seeing me, they both ran over and hugged my waist. Mom, you picked us up so early. Where's Dad? Paul asked, his sharp eyes studying my face. Dad is on a trip, sweetheart. Today we're going to get ice cream, and then Mom has something important to talk to you about. I took them to their favorite artisanal ice cream parlor on the Upper West Side. Watching them eat so innocently, my heart ached. How could I tell them their father was a traitor and their grandmother an ungrateful leech? No, I wouldn't plant seeds of hatred in their young minds. I would give them a choice. Paul, Sophie, I started gently. If one day, Mom and Dad didn't live together anymore, who would you want to live with? Both kids stopped eating and looked at me. Sophie, my sensitive little girl, immediately teared up. Mom, did you and Dad get in a fight? I don't want you to split up. My friend's parents got divorced and she's always sad. I hugged her and stroked her hair. I'm sorry, Sophie. Sometimes there are adult problems we can't fix. Dad and I aren't getting along anymore. But no matter what happens, we will always love you. Paul, much more mature for his age, set his spoon down and looked me right in the eye. I know Dad has someone else. I froze. What? How do you know that? I see him smiling to himself when he's texting. Once I asked to borrow his phone to play a game, and a text popped up from a girl calling him baby. Dad saved her con dingji, zinj danji jinj.gon. I was utterly speechless. Kids today are far more observant than adults realize. My son had known for a while but kept it bottled up inside. And, what do you think about that? I asked, my voice trembling. I hate Dad, Paul said firmly. He never plays with us. He's always busy. When he comes home, he just yells at us. You're the only one who takes us to school, helps us with homework, and takes us to the park. Dad lies all the time. He says he's going to a meeting, but I saw him walking into a cafe with that girl once. Sophie sniffled and added, I want to live with Mom too. Grandma is always mean to me. She calls me useless, just like you. And Aunt Sarah always teases me and takes my iPad. I'm scared of them. Hearing my children's words, I felt my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces, only to forge itself back together into steel. I had tried to protect them, but the toxicity of David's family had already seeped into their lives. Helen, Sarah, and David hadn't just hurt me, they had alienated their own flesh and blood. Okay, I wiped my tears and gave them a resolute smile. I promise you, from now on, Mom will protect you. No one is ever going to hurt you again. We're going to move into a beautiful new apartment, just the three of us, and we are going to be so happy. Okay? Okay? They said in unison, throwing their arms around my neck. My biggest fear was gone. My kids chose me. They were my motivation, my strength to fight to the bitter end. I dropped the kids off at my parents' estate in upstate New York for a few days to free my hands. My parents, hearing the whole story, were furious but completely supportive. My dad hugged me and said, You're doing the right thing, Lizzie. We were wrong to let you endure this. Live for yourself and your kids now. Whatever resources you need, we back you 100%. Backed by my family and driven by my kids, I felt invincible. I drove back to my penthouse, ready to watch the grand finale unfold at the Greenwich estate. At 5:00 p.m., according to the security report, Helen returned from her country club card game in an Uber. Her usual routine was to pull up to the massive wrought iron gates and lean on the buzzer until the housekeeper ran out to open it. But today, the script had changed. Helen stepped out of the Uber and started buzzing the intercom aggressively. 1 minute passed. 2. 5. The heavy iron gates remained sealed shut. No one came out. She started screaming. Where are you useless people? Are you all dead? Open the damn gate! Only silence answered her. The Uber driver began to lose patience and demanded his fare. Helen rummaged through her designer purse, pulled out the supplementary Amex card I had given her, and shoved it through the window. Here, swipe it and get out of here. I need to go discipline my staff. The driver attached the card reader to his phone and swiped. The app glowed red. Transaction declined. Cards declined, lady. Got another one? Or you paying cash? What do you mean declined? My daughter-in-law just loaded thousands onto that account. Try it again? Helen snapped. The driver tried again. Same result. He grew angry. Look, lady. Don't mess with me. If you don't have the cash, get someone from that mansion to come out and pay. Don't waste my time. Panicking, Helen tried calling Sarah, but it went straight to voicemail. She called David. No answer. Finally, humiliated, she had to slide off her gold ring and hand it to the driver as collateral. Take this for now. I'll buy it back from you tomorrow. Utter poverty. Making a scene over a few bucks. The driver snatched the ring, muttered something under his breath, and sped off, leaving Helen alone in front of the locked gates. She marched up to the pedestrian gate and pressed her thumb to the biometric scanner. Beep. 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 The light flashed red. Access denied. What the hell? Helen began pounding her fists against the iron bars. At that moment, Mike, the head of my security detail, stepped out of the guardhouse. Can I help you, ma'am? What do you mean, help me? I'm the mistress of this house. Open this gate immediately. And who the hell are you? I apologize, ma'am. The sole owner of this property is Miss Elizabeth Vance. Miss Vance has issued strict orders not to admit unauthorized personnel. I must ask you to leave. I am her mother-in-law. Are you insane? Call Elizabeth right now. Miss Vance is not on the premises. And according to the authorized access list she provided, your name is not on it. We have packed your personal belongings and placed them by the curb over there. Please collect them and vacate the area. Helen looked in the direction he pointed and saw a small pile of Home Depot moving boxes stacked on the sidewalk. She went ballistic, lunging at the iron bars. but Mike stepped back with a cold, professional stare. Please do not cause a disturbance, ma'am. We are only following orders. If you continue to trespass, we will call the Greenwich police. Utterly humiliated, Helen slumped onto the ground next to the boxes and began to wail. But in this ultra-wealthy neighborhood, hidden behind high walls and manicured hedges, no one cared about an old woman throwing a tantrum on the sidewalk. At 7:00 p.m., Sarah returned from a drinking session in Manhattan. She was heavily buzzed, dropped off by a friend at the gate. Seeing her mother sitting miserably next to a pile of cardboard boxes, Sarah slurred. "Mom, what are you doing out here? Why aren't you inside? I'm getting eaten alive by mosquitoes." "Inside? Your precious sister-in-law threw us out on the street." "She changed the locks, canceled our cards, and put these goons at the gate." Sarah sobered up instantly. She rushed to the gate and started violently rattling the bars. "Liz, get out here right now. What right do you have to kick us out? This is my brother's house." Mike stepped out again and gave her the exact same cold explanation. Furious, Sarah yanked out her phone to call her frat boyfriends to come beat up the guards. But when she looked at her screen, she saw a notification from American Express. "Your card has been suspended at the request of the primary account holder." Right below it was an angry text from her friend from the bar. "Bitch, your card bounced. They kept your Chanel bag as collateral. Bring the cash tomorrow, or they're calling the cops." Sarah screamed in despair. She was accustomed to living large, swiping cards without a second thought. Now, without a dime to her name, locked out on the street as night fell, she finally tasted true helplessness. But the biggest blow was yet to come. Helen's phone rang. It was the transplant coordinator at NY Presbyterian. She scrambled to answer, hoping for good news about a donor kidney. "Hello, Dr. Davis? Do you have the kidney?" "Good evening, Mrs. Vance. I'm calling to inform you that your kidney transplant surgery scheduled for next week has been canceled." "What? Canceled? What do you mean canceled?" Helen's voice cracked. "The financial guarantor for your procedure, Miss Elizabeth Vance, has formally withdrawn her funding and requested your file be pulled from the active surgical roster. Without the required funds, we are forced to cancel the operation. Please contact the billing department if you secure alternative financing." The phone slipped from Helen's hand and clattered onto the pavement. She collapsed entirely, her face pale as a corpse. Her only hope for life had just been snatched away. She clutched her chest, gasping for air, a panic attack seizing her. "Mom! Mom! What's wrong?" Sarah dropped to her knees, holding her. "She killed me." Liz cut off the hospital money. "They aren't doing the transplant." Hearing that, Sarah's legs gave out. Mother and daughter clung to each other, weeping uncontrollably in the cold, dark Connecticut night. I was in my penthouse, calmly cutting into a medium-rare steak with a glass of Cabernet, when my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. I answered and put her on speakerphone. "Speak, sister-in-law." Sarah's shriek through the speaker was so piercing I had to wince. "How dare you cancel my mother's surgery? Do you want her to die? Open that gate right now, or I swear to God I'll kill you." I calmly took a sip of wine. "Sarah, darling, watch your tone. I didn't kill anyone. I simply stopped handing out free money. Your mother's life is your responsibility. And your brother's, not mine. Why put that burden on me when I'm just an outsider? Don't be a psycho. You know damn well we don't have that kind of money." "Oh, really?" I feigned shock. "I thought your family had principles and values. I thought your brother was a genius academic. How is it possible he can't afford to treat his own mother? What have you all been living on these past 10 years? Air? Or the money of this soulless materialist?" Sarah, out of arguments, resorted to raw threats. "If you don't open that gate and wire the money to the hospital right now, I'm calling David. He'll come down there and deal with you. He won't let you get away with this." "Excellent." I laughed loudly. "I've been waiting for David to call. Go ahead, call him right now. Tell him to bring his true love over to save his mother. Let's see if the surgeons accept spiritual connection as payment for a kidney transplant." I hung up and blocked her number. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. David. I knew it. Sarah must have called him sobbing hysterically. "Hello, my love. Calling about business?" I answered in a sickly, sweet, sarcastic tone. Liz! What the hell are you doing? David screamed, his voice cracking with rage. You dare throw my mother and sister out on the street? You dare cut off my mother's medical bills? Do you have no heart? Calm down, David, I replied smoothly. Didn't you say that living with me was suffocating, like a prison? I am liberating you and your family. I am giving you the freedom to be independent, to care for each other with your noble, pure love. You should be thanking me. Stop trying to justify this. What you're doing is illegal. That house is marital property. You have no right to evict us. Marital property. David, for a man with a PhD, you know remarkably little about the law. That estate was left to me by my grandparents before we even met. The deed is solely in my name. Did you conveniently forget the ironclad prenuptial agreement my parents made you sign? Assets acquired before the marriage are separate property. Who lives in my house is entirely my decision. David was struck dumb. He had absolutely forgotten or willfully chosen to forget the prenup that protected my empire. Fine, he gritted his teeth. If you're going to be an ungrateful bitch, don't blame me for getting ugly. Stay right there. I'm coming over. Come on over. I'll be waiting. And don't forget to bring your little student mistress, so she can see how her real man handles things when he doesn't have his wife's teat to suck on. Half an hour later, an Uber screeched to a halt in front of the Greenwich gates. David stormed out, furious. Lauren timidly followed behind him, looking terrified. I watched the entire feed through the security cameras hooked up to my iPad. The portrait of his family was pathetic. Helen was groaning on a piece of flattened cardboard. Sarah was sitting on the curb, her expensive makeup smeared like a clown's. David, looking ragged in his wrinkled shirt, threw himself at the gates and started shaking them. Liz! Open the door! Stop hiding! Come out and talk to me like a civilized human being. I activated the microphone connected to the external intercom. My voice boomed out, crisp and authoritative. I'm not in there, so don't bother screaming. I am very, very far away, in a place that doesn't reek of betrayal. You want to talk? Great. My lawyer will see you tomorrow. Tonight, enjoy the fresh air. You, David stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the camera. Oh, by the way, I continued. David, I assume you haven't checked your university email yet? Your grant funding has been terminated. You might want to start drafting your explanation for the ethics committee. And Lauren, your scholarship is gone. Tuition for the spring semester is entirely on you. Hearing that, Lauren broke down sobbing. David, what are we going to do? I don't have the money for tuition. My mom needs me to send cash home. David turned to hug Lauren, but the arrogant, protective confidence he had at the pub was gone, replaced by deep, hollow desperation. He looked at his dying mother, his panicking sister, his sobbing mistress, and the cold, impenetrable iron gates. For the first time in his life, Dr. David Vance experienced the absolute helplessness of a man who truly had nothing, and this was only the beginning of the false idol's collapse. The next morning, I drove up to the Greenwich estate. I didn't get out right away. I just sat in the idling SUV, watching. The scene outside my gates looked like a battlefield after a rout. Helen was curled up on the cardboard, shivering under David's suit jacket. Sarah was slumped against the stone pillar, looking exhausted and broken. David and Lauren were sitting on the curb together, looking defeated. They had spent the entire night outside, enduring the damp cold of the Connecticut autumn. They probably thought if they waited long enough, I would soften and let them in. They were dead wrong. My compassion for them had flatlined long ago. I leaned on the horn, letting out a long, piercing blast. The sound made them all jump. Helen scrambled up, rubbing her eyes. David and Lauren leaped to their feet, staring at the approaching Mercedes. I rolled down the window, took off my Tom Ford sunglasses, and looked at them with Arctic chill. Good morning, everyone. How was your night under the stars? Very romantic. Just like the movies. David rushed the car, slapping the glass. Liz, get out here. How much longer are you going to torture us? My mother is dying. I calmly opened the door and stepped out. Mike and his security guards immediately flanked me, preventing David from getting too close. I stood on the driveway, separated from them by the iron gates, looking down on them like a queen surveying her prisoners. Torture you? I laughed mockingly. I didn't tie your hands and feet. You have legs. You could have called a cab, gone to a Motel 6. Why do you insist on clinging to my gates like leeches? Oh, wait. I forgot. You don't have any money. Cards declined. No cash. What a tragedy for fake high society. Lauren, her voice hoarse from the cold, whimpered. Miss, Vance, please. If you're angry, take it out on me. But don't make Helen and Professor Vance suffer. She's so weak. Please just let her inside to rest. I turned to Lauren, who was still trying to play the holy martyr. Shut your mouth. You have no voice here. You say, don't make them suffer? You are the one who blew up this family and got them thrown on the street. You used my money to buy Gucci bags, go to spas, and make yourself look pretty to seduce my husband. And now you want to play the saint? I reached into my purse, pulled out a thick manila folder, and threw it through the iron bars onto the pavement at their feet. Take a look. Those are the credit card statements for the last 6 months from the secret supplementary account David opened for you. $10,000 at Gucci, $15,000 on weekend resort trips, $5,000 a month on fine dining. Over $40,000 total. With that money, you could have rented a nice apartment for this whole family for an entire year. Hearing the number $40,000, Helen and Sarah's eyes widened in horror. They lunged for the folder. Helen's hands shook as she flipped through the highlighted statements. Her face turned beet red. You dared use my son's money to buy designer bags? Helen shrieked, turning on Lauren like a rabid dog. Whenever I asked him for money for my premium vitamins, he said he was broke. And he was giving it all to you? Sarah screamed too. I asked David for $1,000 for a dress last month, and he lectured me about being wasteful. And you're blowing 40 grand like it's nothing? Lauren backed away, terrified, stammering. No, it's not like that. Professor Vance bought those things for me. I didn't ask him to. Caught in the crossfire, David didn't know who to defend. He wanted to shield his mistress, but he was terrified of his mother and sister's wrath. Mom, Sarah, calm down. There's an explanation for this. An explanation? I cut in smoothly. Go ahead. Tear each other to pieces. I just came to deliver the news. My lawyer is filing the divorce papers in Manhattan court this morning. Since you committed adultery and embezzled marital funds to fund your mistress, I am aggressively pursuing the asset division allowed to me by law. And the bad news for you, David, is that with this evidence, you are walking away with absolutely nothing. David looked at me, pale and horrified. You wouldn't dare. Why wouldn't I? Who do you think I am? I am Elizabeth Vance. If I had the power to build you up, I have the power to grind you into the dirt. Enjoy your final moments as a Columbia professor, David, because very soon you're going to be famous. With that, I turned around and walked back to my car, ordering security to ensure the gates stayed locked. I ignored the screaming, the cursing, and the sounds of the family tearing itself apart behind me. That afternoon, Mr. Sterling, my ruthless corporate lawyer, met David at a diner near the Columbia campus to serve the papers. I didn't go. I had no desire to look at his face ever again. I gave Mr. Sterling full authority to crush him. David arrived looking defeated, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled clothes, sporting a heavy scruff. Lauren was glued to his side like a remora. Now that she had nothing, he was her only lifeboat. Mr. Sterling placed a massive stack of documents on the table. Good afternoon, Dr. Vance. I am legal counsel for Miss Elizabeth Vance. Here is the divorce petition and the proposed asset division settlement. Please review it. David took the papers with trembling hands. What does she want? My client is filing for an at-fault divorce. Regarding the children, Miss Vance demands full physical and legal custody. You will not be required to pay child support, mostly because you won't be able to afford it. Regarding assets, the Greenwich estate and the Manhattan penthouse are shielded by the prenuptial agreement. The Mercedes you drive is corporate property of Apex Holdings. Therefore, you are entitled to 0% of these assets. David slammed his fist on the table. This is absurd. I put 10 years of my life into this family. I worked. I gave her my university salary. Why should I walk away empty-handed? I want half. That house is worth millions, Lauren chimed in, trying to sound supportive. Exactly. Professor Vance worked incredibly hard. Even if he didn't make as much, he contributed. Miss, Vance can't be this vindictive. Mr. Sterling smiled, calmly adjusting his glasses. Dr. Vance, you say you contributed? Let me show you the math. He pulled out a colorful financial spreadsheet. Over the last 10 years, your total gross income as an adjunct professor was approximately $450,000. However, your personal expenses, the debts your sister incurred, the medical bills for your mother, and the corporate grants Miss Vance funneled into your department total over $3.5 million. Mathematically speaking, you owe my client $3 million. Miss Vance is being incredibly generous by not suing you for that debt. All she asks is that you sign the papers and walk away. David stared at the undeniable numbers, breaking out in a cold sweat. He had no idea I kept such meticulous receipts. She gave me that money voluntarily, he protested weakly. Indeed. But if you wish to drag this through asset division litigation, we will be forced to submit all evidence of your adultery into the public record. Mr. Sterling pulled out a stack of glossy 8x10 photos. These are photos of you and Miss Evans entering various boutique hotels, flight manifests, and credit card receipts. If this file lands on the desk of the Columbia University Title IX office, or the Ethics Committee, or gets leaked to the student paper, I'm afraid your academic career will be terminated by sundown. You will lose your tenure track, your reputation, and your dignity. David was paralyzed. He knew exactly how strict Ivy League ethics codes were regarding professors sleeping with their own students, especially when grant money was involved. If he was fired for cause, he'd be blacklisted from academia entirely. His PhD would become a joke. You're blackmailing me, David hissed through his teeth. We are not blackmailing you. We are offering you an exit, mister, Sterling said coldly. Sign the uncontested divorce, and you walk away with a shred of dignity, no massive debt, and no public scandal. Take us to court, and you lose everything, and drown in legal fees. Choose. Lauren, hearing the threat of him losing his job, panicked. She pulled on David's sleeve. David, baby, sign it. If you get fired, how are we going to live? You're a genius. You'll find another way to make money. We'll start from scratch. We don't need that old woman's money. Sign it to save your job so we can get back on our feet. Lauren's naive words stroked David's wounded ego. He actually believed he was a phoenix who had merely stumbled. He was convinced that his superior intellect would quickly restore his status and make me regret everything. He picked up the pen, but his hand hovered. Visions of the Greenwich Mansion, the catered parties, the Mercedes flashed through his mind. Signing meant abandoning all of it, going back to a cramped apartment and riding the subway. What are you waiting for? Mister, Sterling pressed. I have another meeting. Miss Vance instructed me that if you don't sign by 5:00 p.m., we file the contested suit and overnight the dossier to the dean. At that exact moment, David's phone rang. It was Helen. David, son, are you coming? I'm so hungry. My back is killing me. We need to find a hotel. I can't take this anymore. Did you get the settlement money from Liz? David looked at Lauren, then down at the papers. He was cornered. If he didn't sign, he lost his job, and his mother would literally be sleeping on the sidewalk. Mom, give me a minute. I'm handling it. He hung up and took a deep breath, pasting a look of false pride onto his face. Fine. I'll sign. I don't want a dime of that bitch's dirty money anyway. I'll show her I'm not a kept man. I have my intellect. I'll rebuild it all. Lauren clapped her hands softly. Yes. Baby, you're amazing. You're going to be so successful. Money is temporary. Honor is forever. Empowered by her empty platitudes, David pressed the pen to the paper. His signature was shaky but finalized the end of our decade-long marriage. Done. Take it and tell Liz she can choke on her freedom. Mister. Sterling inspected the signature, smiled in satisfaction, and packed the documents into his briefcase. Thank you for your cooperation, Dr. Vance. Oh, allow me to add a personal message from my client. Miss. Vance asked me to pass along her deepest gratitude to Miss Evans. Lauren looked confused. Gratitude? To me? Yes. Miss Vance says that thanks to you opening her eyes to what true, pure love looks like, She finally found the strength to drop the dead weight she's been dragging around for 10 years. She wishes you both a lifetime of happiness in your humble shack with your hearts of gold. Good day. Mr. Sterling stood and walked out, leaving David and Lauren frozen in the booth. His parting words felt like a slap in the face. David was beginning to realize that the freedom he just signed for might not taste as sweet as he imagined. Clutching his copy of the divorce decree, David walked out of the diner. It had started to drizzle. Without the Mercedes, he and Lauren had to huddle under a bodega awning, waiting for an Uber. David, where are we going now? Lauren asked quietly. First, we go pick up my mother and Sarah. Then we find a room to rent. A room? Lauren wrinkled her nose in disgust. Why don't we just get an apartment? I'm not used to living in cramped spaces with roommates. David glared at his mistress, her demands suddenly feeling like nails on a chalkboard. With what money? I have barely $2,000 in my checking account. Do you think landlords in New York don't ask for first, last, and a security deposit? Lauren shut her mouth, intimidated. David hailed an UberX, and they drove back to Greenwich to collect his mother and sister, along with the moving boxes. That evening, hauling all their garbage bags and boxes, the four of them crammed into a tiny, rundown studio apartment. David managed to sublet in a bad part of the Bronx. It was a 300-square-foot box, with peeling linoleum floors, a leaky radiator, and a bathroom that smelled like mildew. The moment Helen walked in, she pinched her nose. My God, what is this pigsty? David, how could you bring me to a place like this? I can't even breathe. Sarah stomped her foot. I am not staying here. It's disgusting. David, do something. You're a Columbia professor. You can't let your family live in a slum. David dropped a heavy box on the floor and snapped. Shut up, both of you! Just be grateful we have a roof over our heads. We have no money. We have no house. What do you want me to do? Go back to Greenwich and beg Liz on your knees if you want luxury. Hearing my name, the three women went dead silent. They knew that door was welded shut forever. That night, in that cramped Bronx studio, the four of them slept huddled together on a cheap air mattress and the floor. Helen moaned about her back. Sarah cried for her Egyptian cotton sheets. Lauren turned toward the wall, weeping silently. David stared at the water-stained ceiling, his eyes wide open. He touched the folded divorce decree in his shirt pocket. His signature was there in black ink, like a scar. He had signed it with the arrogance of a man whose ego was wounded, believing he would rise from the ashes. But now, faced with the brutal, suffocating reality of poverty, that pride couldn't put food on the table. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten a real meal in 24 hours. He remembered the private chef at the Greenwich estate, the vintage wine, the massive bed smelling of expensive detergent. It was all gone, popped like a soap bubble. And what was worse, he realized that tomorrow, when the sun came up, the true fight for survival began. How would he face his colleagues at the university? Where would he get the money to feed 3 extra mouths when his adjunct paycheck was barely enough to cover the rent on this dump? My revenge wasn't about hiring thugs to beat them or screaming insults in the street. My revenge was forcing them to taste the utter poverty they so arrogantly looked down on. I threw them into a swamp of their own making and let them devour each other. Sitting in my Manhattan penthouse, sipping hot chamomile tea, I smiled at the rain streaking against the floor-to-ceiling windows. I had won, a bloodless, utterly devastating victory. The next morning, I received a call from the NYPD. David had gone to a precinct to file a report against me for grand larceny and illegal eviction. I smiled. I expected this desperate move. I took an Uber to the precinct, armed with my legal binder. I presented the property deed in my name, the notarized prenuptial agreement, corporate asset registrations, and the security footage from the gate showing them trespassing. In front of the desk sergeant, David tried to maintain his professorial dignity. Officer, look at how my own wife treats me. She threw my sick, elderly mother onto the street in the freezing cold. This behavior is a severe violation of human decency. The officer looked at David, then tapped the binder I provided. Mr. Vance, under New York state law, the property in Greenwich belongs exclusively to Miss Vance. She has the absolute right to decide who resides there. You are legally separated and signed an uncontested divorce. The fact that you brought your mother and sister to her gate to cause a disturbance constitutes trespassing and harassment. David was speechless, his face flushing crimson. But she stole our belongings. You're mistaken. David, I interjected calmly. I carefully packed your personal items and left them by the curb. You refused to take them because you were busy throwing a tantrum. As for the valuables, the art, the cars, do you have a single receipt showing you paid for them? David muttered. They were bought during the marriage. With whose money? I challenged. Every single item was paid for from my corporate accounts, written off as company assets. Do you want the officer to audit the receipts? David fell silent. He knew he was utterly defeated. Ultimately, the police forced him to sign a warning, agreeing to cease all harassment, and he slinked out of the precinct with his tail between his legs. Returning to the miserable Bronx studio, David walked into an even more depressing scene. Helen was moaning on the floor in agony from her failing kidneys. Sarah was frantically tearing through the black trash bags of clothes I had sent. Where is my mink coat? Where is my Hermes Birkin bag? Sarah shrieked. Why is there nothing but old Zara and H&M in here? I had instructed the staff to pack only their oldest, cheapest clothing. Every piece of designer luxury they bought with my money stayed in the house, destined to be donated to Goodwill. It wasn't about the money. It was about stripping them of everything my Grace had provided. Stop it! David roared at his sister. Stop complaining. I just came from the precinct. We lost. The house is hers. The stuff is hers. We aren't getting a dime back. Hearing this, the three women collapsed in despair. Their final fantasy of moving back into the mansion evaporated. The bad news didn't stop there. Later that afternoon, David received an urgent summons from the dean of his department at Columbia. He hastily ironed his only remaining suit, trying to slick back his hair to look respectable. Inside the dean's office, the tension was suffocating. The dean slid an official letter across the mahogany desk. Dr. Vance, Apex Holdings has officially pulled all grant funding for your department's research project. The stated reason is a severe breach of professional ethics by the principal investigator. Would you care to explain? Sweating profusely, David tried to spin it. Dean Reynolds, this is a personal misunderstanding between my estranged wife and me. We're going through a messy divorce. She's just trying to damage my career. I'll speak with her and smooth it over. It's not just the funding. David! The dean interrupted, sliding a manila envelope toward him. The Title IX office received an anonymous complaint containing these. David looked down and saw the glossy photos of him and Lauren kissing outside a boutique hotel in Chelsea. He went pale. He instantly knew the anonymous complaint was my doing. The rumor has already spread through the student body, the dean said coldly. Having a sexual relationship with an undergraduate student under your direct supervision, and allegedly using grant funds for hotel rooms, is a severe violation of university policy. It is a PR nightmare. Dean? Please, Dr. Vance, effective immediately, you are suspended without pay pending a full investigation. Furthermore, since the grant was abruptly canceled due to your conduct, the university will require you to reimburse the $50,000 cash advance you took for the upcoming symposium. If you fail to repay it, our legal department will sue you. David stumbled out of the dean's office as if his soul had been ripped from his chest. Suspended, disgraced, $50,000 in debt. When he walked out to the faculty parking lot, he saw his black Mercedes. Out of habit, he reached for the door handle, but a burly man in a suit blocked him. Excuse me, step away from the vehicle. That's my car. Who are you? I am a repo agent contracted by Apex Holdings. This vehicle is corporate property, and Dr. David Vance's authorization to drive it has been revoked. The man snatched the keys from David's hand, got in the car, and drove away. Right in front of hundreds of undergrads changing classes, students began pointing and whispering, "Oh my God, is that Professor Vance? Did his car just get repossessed? I heard he was sleeping with Lauren from the literature department. His rich wife dumped him and cut off his allowance. Wow, I thought he was a baller. Turns out he was just a sugar baby." The whispers were like thousands of needles stabbing into David's ego. He stood paralyzed in the quad, experiencing a level of public humiliation he had never known. The image of the brilliant, wealthy, noble professor he had spent years cultivating was dead and buried. His phone buzzed. A direct deposit notification from the university. Final partial paycheck. $850. That was the true market value of the genius Dr. David Vance, without my empire backing him. It wasn't even enough to buy the bottles of Bordeaux he used to drink with dinner. By July, New York City was melting under a brutal heat wave. Temperatures hit 100 degrees. Inside the ground-floor Bronx studio, the air was as thick and suffocating as an oven. A cheap box fan rattled in the corner, merely pushing hot air around. Helen lay on the mattress, groaning and panting. Her kidney disease had worsened dramatically. Her body was swollen, her skin yellowing. Without my money to pay for premium meds and specialists, she was relying on cheap over-the-counter painkillers from the corner bodega. It's so hot. I'm so thirsty. Lauren, get me some ice water, Helen croaked. Lauren, sitting in the corner, scrolling through TikTok, snapped back without looking up. Get it yourself. I'm exhausted too. I'm stuck in this hellhole playing nurse to an old woman. Sarah, sweating and irritable, jumped up and grabbed Lauren by the hair. What did you just say? Who are you calling an old woman? That's my mother, you ungrateful tramp. You're nothing but a freeloader. The two women erupted into a vicious scratching and pulling fight. David walked in the door right at that moment, dead tired. Since being blacklisted from academia, no tutoring center or private school would hire him. To keep them from starving, the genius academic was forced to ride an e-bike 12 hours a day doing DoorDash deliveries. He threw his helmet on the floor and screamed, "Enough! Shut the fuck up, both of you. We have enough problems without you two tearing the place apart." Sarah let go of Lauren and glared at her brother. How much did you make today? $80, David panted, collapsing onto a chair. I had to fix a flat tire on the bike, so I'm left with 50. $50? Sarah sneered. That won't even buy us decent takeout. David, you have to figure something out. I don't even have money for tampons. Where the hell do you want me to get money? David roared. You have arms and legs. Go get a job. Or are you just going to sit around all day waiting for a handout? Sarah stormed off into the bathroom, slamming the door. She was used to VIP bottle service. The idea of washing dishes or working retail was beneath her dignity. She had tried calling her rich friends for loans, but they had all blocked her number the second they realized the Vance gravy train had derailed. From the mattress, Helen watched her skeletal, exhausted son and the two lazy, vicious women fighting over pennies. Tears rolled down her face. She remembered the hot gourmet breakfasts I used to have prepared for her. She remembered how I arranged for the best physical therapist to massage her legs. She felt a crushing wave of regret, but it was far too late. Living in that suffocating, destitute box had stripped away their masks. The people who once paraded around as noble, educated elites had devolved into vicious, spiteful animals. It was hell on earth, and the more desperate they got, the more they turned on each other. Lauren, David's pure true love, finally showed her true colors. Poverty burned away her fake innocence. She constantly belittled David for being useless, comparing him to the wealthy frat boys she used to date. I must have been blind to fall for you, Lauren sneered one night over a dinner of boiled rice and canned beans. I thought you were this powerful intellectual. Turns out you're just a pathetic delivery boy. I should have hooked up with a barista. At least they get free coffee. David threw his plate against the wall, shattering it. Shut your mouth. When I had money and a Benz, you clung to me like a parasite. Now that I'm broke, you treat me like trash. A gold digger like you isn't worth a dime. Helen and Sarah instantly joined the attack. Get out! We don't need a tramp like you taking up space. You ruined this family, Helen yelled, throwing a dirty pillow at her. Lauren didn't back down. She stood up and shoved Helen hard against the wall. Shut up, you old hag. I've had enough of you. Do you think you're still the lady of a mansion? You're just a dying burden. Seeing her mother shoved, Sarah tackled Lauren, slapping her across the face. Don't you dare touch my mother. I'll kill you! The three women rolled on the filthy floor, tearing at each other's clothes. David watched them, completely paralyzed by disgust. He didn't intervene. A sick part of him actually enjoyed it. He wanted Lauren to suffer. He wanted her to pay for tricking him, even though he was the one who threw his life away. That night, Lauren packed her meager belongings and vanished into the muggy New York night. David sighed in relief, thinking he had shed a massive burden. But he was wrong. Lauren didn't leave alone. She was carrying a ticking time bomb in her womb. 2 weeks later, Lauren returned. She looked even more emaciated, with dark, sunken eyes. She stood in the doorway of the studio, clutching a crumpled ultrasound printout. David, I'm pregnant. It's yours. David, who was trying to patch a hole in his delivery bag, froze as if struck by lightning. Pregnant? Now? When he could barely afford ramen noodles? You're lying. He rejected her instantly. How do I know it's mine? With your track record, God knows who you've been sleeping with. Lauren dropped to her knees, sobbing. I swear it's yours. I haven't been with anyone else. If you don't believe me, we'll do a DNA test when it's born. Baby, please. Let's start over. I'll get a job at a diner. I won't complain anymore. We can be a family. Helen, hearing this from her mattress, dragged herself upright and pointed a trembling finger at the door. Marry you? You think you can use a bastard baby to trap my son? In your dreams. Our family will never accept trash like you. David looked at Lauren with dead, cold eyes. Get an abortion. What? Lauren gasped, unable to process it. I said get an abortion. I can't afford to feed myself, let alone a kid. Do you want it to be born just to starve to death? Go to a clinic. I'll pawn my laptop and give you $300. David's sheer callousness was the final blow that shattered Lauren's sanity. She stared at the man she once idolized, the man she thought would give her a life of luxury and academic prestige, and saw a heartless monster. You aren't human, Lauren screamed, lunging at David, her nails aiming for his eyes. Sarah, seeing her brother attacked, grabbed a heavy wooden broom handle from the corner and swung it as hard as she could, striking Lauren squarely in the stomach. Get off him, you psycho! The blunt force impact sent Lauren crashing to the concrete floor. She let out a blood-curdling scream, curling into a fetal position, clutching her abdomen. A thick stream of dark blood began pooling between her legs, staining the linoleum. My baby, Lauren whispered, her eyes rolling back. David and Sarah froze in absolute terror, staring at the spreading pool of blood. Helen passed out from the shock. None of them dared to call 911 because they knew they would be arrested for assault, and they had no money for hospital bills. They just stood there, watching the life drain out of the unborn child. By the time the downstairs neighbors heard the screaming and called an ambulance, it was too late. The baby couldn't be saved. Lauren lost a massive amount of blood and slipped into a state of severe psychotic shock. After being discharged from the city hospital's psychiatric ward, Lauren went completely insane. She wandered the streets in dirty clothes, constantly muttering about her lost baby, her mansion in Greenwich, and true love. She stalked the Bronx studio, tormenting David's family. One rainy night in late October, Lauren managed to pick the flimsy lock on the studio door. David was dead asleep, exhausted from a 4-hour delivery shift. Helen was delirious with fever, and Sarah was out on the streets. Lauren crept up to David's mattress, holding a rusted fruit knife she'd found in an alley. In her delusional state, she whispered, David, baby, let's go. Let's go to heaven. There's no poverty there, no old wife. We'll be happy forever with our baby. David woke up with a start. Seeing a deranged Lauren holding a knife to his throat, he screamed, shoved her back, and bolted out the door. He sprinted up the stairs of the tenement building, bursting onto the tar paper roof. Lauren chased him like a demon, her eyes bloodshot, a manic, twisted smile on her face. Where are you going? You promised we'd be together forever. Trapped on the 5-story roof with nowhere left to run, David backed up against the low parapet. Below him was the cold, wet asphalt of the Bronx. Lauren, put the knife down. Let's talk about this. David begged, crying. Lauren didn't listen. She lunged forward, throwing her arms around him in a vice grip. The sudden impact, combined with the rain-slicked roofing, threw David off balance. He slipped, falling backward over the low ledge. Lauren clung to him in a death embrace he couldn't break. A horrifying scream tore through the rainy night. They plummeted off the 5th floor together. Crack. And then, silence. Their blood mingled with the cold New York rain, washing down the gutter. The end of a guilty romance. The end of blind ambition and despicable betrayal. When the police arrived and informed Helen of her son's gruesome death, the shock triggered a massive stroke. She died in the back of an ambulance before reaching the ER. Sarah, left completely alone, used a GoFundMe set up by pitying neighbors to pay for a cheap cremation. Terrified by the crushing mountain of debt and the police investigation, she packed a duffel bag, fled the state, and vanished into the underbelly of America. She was never heard from again. 3 years later, I stood on the glass balcony of my new oceanfront home in Malibu, California, breathing in the crisp Pacific air. The sea breeze ruffled my hair, which I now wore in a sharp, bold bob. After the dust settled, I sold the Greenwich estate. It held too many toxic memories. I moved across the country with my 2 kids to start fresh on the West Coast. My business had exploded. I expanded my holding company to include a nationwide chain of luxury boutique hotels, cementing my status as one of the most successful female CEOs in the country. Paul and Sophie were thriving. They were brilliant students, well-adjusted and empathetic. They never mentioned their father, instinctively protecting me from the ghosts of the past. I took a sip of my chamomile tea, watching my children chase the waves on the pristine white sand below. A profound, unbreakable peace filled my chest. I had survived the hurricane. I had exacted my revenge. And more importantly, I had learned how to let go. Now, I lived entirely for myself, radiant and proud, like a sunflower that only looks toward the light. The past was buried. The traders had paid the ultimate price for their choices. And I, the once devoted wife, had finally discovered the true currency of life: freedom.